for now.
Subject to change. No change.
It's recording?
Yeah, be sure not to, be.
I won't touch
That's
that.
on?
Don't touch it.
Don't touch the mic.
Okay, welcome to the next episode of IMU Podcast. There's three of us today. It's obviously Kwang and Ashley, and then we have Dominick. And Dominick's a good friend, Ashley's fiance. And I'll let him introduce himself real quick.
Hi everybody, my name is Dominick Deanna. I am a network care practitioner. Network care is a form of body work and energy work that we recognize where your undigested life or muscle tension is stuck in your body that is consistent with your consciousness, your perception, your belief system, and your behavior. So if you want to move forward in life, network care is an amazing system that recognizes where you're at and what we can do to facilitate you moving forward in resolving that, and however it may show up, physically or emotionally.
And how long have you been doing it?
This is my 21st year.
Yeah, so
A little while.
10,000 hour rule, probably surpassed it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
cool.
been a while. It's fun, and it's a privilege to sponsor people moving forward in life.
Okay, and then I would say from maybe like the 5 years in versus now, where did you notice like your growth, like as far as supplying the care? Like what was the biggest growth? So like the last 15 years.
So over the last 15 years, like what's changed with me as being a provider? of
Yeah,
the
just
care,
like how
or-
because obviously you've gotten better and better, right? And then
So
like
I think what you're asking is what's changed with me as a result of being a practitioner, and how has that changed my game in sponsoring other people?
yeah.
We all have our game, as David Mailer calls it, or our blind spots. And any area within you that you have a blind spot, you're not seeing that with other people. And if you don't see it, you can't grow from it. So I would say that me receiving the care that I provide and doing the consciousness exercises, the more connected I get, the more I see my own game, the more I can effortlessly recognize it in other people. And that has significantly upped my playership.
Okay, so it's actually how instead of thinking of it almost like you applying care to other people, it's more like you're more connected to them before and as you're working on them, and allows you to like resonate together. Or
Who you are as a practitioner who you are as a person precedes who you are as a practitioner.
Right.
So the more I get myself open and connected, the more I can see where the other person is at. There's less blind spots and it's more obvious. And the more I'm able to sponsor other people moving forward.
So the more connected you are to yourself, the better the practitioner you are.
Anytime you go on a hike and you've been there before, the next time you go and you bring friends, you can be their guide because you know the path and you know what to expect, where it's going to happen, where you're going to rest, where you're going to eat, where you're going to take a pee break, the whole 9 yards. It's the same. Once I've gone through that growth with me, it's so much easier to guide someone else, if that analogy works.
Mm-hmm.
okay, and then before this, we were brainstorming because this one it was more like, hey, what's present on your mind? What we're going to talk about.
Wait, pause. Do you want to say, because you call them consciousness exercises, I don't think anyone knows what that is other than Kwang and I.
Do you want me to describe them briefly?
Yes.
So whatever's going on in your life around you.
Well, you can say it's, because we've actually talked about SRI, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
so
somatic
it's a-
respiratory integration.
It's
yeah.
another name for SRI and body connection.
So think of there's natural rhythms that we all go into. Like I'm not sure to what depth you guys went into the somatic respiratory integration, but basically
I don't
all
remember.
of life's experiences that you've experienced as an individual that you got the gift in, your body grew, you grew as a person with your consciousness. And when I say consciousness, I mean people put their spin on it. Basically, it's how you view the world, the lens through which you view the world, and what you do with that interaction and the meaning you give it and how you show up. The consciousness exercises are basically a 12-step protocol for you to develop your flexibility in consciousness, and what Kwang's a big proponent of is your perception, availability, and flexibility. So basically everything that you go through life that's a trauma, the only reason it's a trauma is because of your limited playership in perception. So if you could experience something that was a trauma for you, but instead view it through what is the gift in this and how is life trying to guide me? How can I grow from this? Your body does something completely different with it. And I can give an analogy. Is that okay if I take a minute to do that? I witnessed a car accident where there were 3 cars that slammed into each other. All 3 rear-ended. 2 of them rear-ended. Obviously, the third one was the one providing the energy or the force. The lady who was in the front had a Volvo, and it was a classic Volvo from probably the early 80s, you know, where they showed commercials with a truck sitting on top of the car, how strong the German engineering is. So if you can picture that. That was the first car. It got rear-ended, and it was like a tank. But the bumper was rusted, or the bolts, the shafts that held it on, so the bumper fell off. So the lady got out of the car. She was furious, her classic car. She was completely distraught about her classic car and how it was damaged, even though it didn't look like anything happened except the rusty bumper fell off. The car that hit her, that was pushed into her, the front was smashed, the back was smashed, and I think it was a PT Cruiser if I remember right. The guy got out of his car, looked to the front of it, saw it was completely smashed in from hitting the tank, the Volvo, walked around the back of the car and saw that his back was smashed in as well from getting rear-ended. And he was just so elated. You'd have thought the guy won the lottery. And I'm watching this going, why is this guy excited, like so happy that he got rear-ended? And then, of course, the car that initiated the impact, the car in the rear, the third car, you know, had some damage, and he was a little upset. So I'm like, okay, so the first one's upset, the third one's upset, the one in the middle that got the most damage is excited. And he says, I hated this car. He said, this car was the biggest piece of shit I've ever had in my life. He says, I've been paying on it, and it's only a year and a half old, and I had nothing but problems with it. I'm so excited to get rid of it. But what I'm saying is that the same impact amount of energy went through all 3 cars-ish. I'm sure an engineer could argue with that, but pretty similar. Same accident. What I'm saying is if we did a muscle tension scan on all 3 of those individuals, the person who took the most impact, the first one hit, right, the guy in the middle, you would expect him to have the most tension or the most damage or the most energy into his body from the impact. What I'm saying is because of his perception of the accident, he probably had the least tension because the meaning he gave it was an empowering meaning versus a disempowering meaning.
And therefore, you could digest that energy.
And therefore, he gave it a positive meaning. Therefore, it's an opportunity for growth. But if he were to give it a different meaning, a different perception, that how he screwed over, how now he's going to be late to a kid's birthday party, now he's got to go find a new car, now he's got to deal with a car accident, a car report, now this is going to go in his, now his insurance, he gave it a disempowering meaning, which would have been just as valid, right? I mean, there's a lot of reasons to justify it. His body would have been more beat up, he would have had more damage, he would have had more inflammation. So what I'm saying is your flexibility and perception and the meaning that you give events in life is more important than what actually happens.
Right, and we talked about this last week, right? It's like when you give a meaning, it's effortless. It just naturally comes up. If you're pissed and then you have to verbalize like, oh no, it's such a blessing, like I didn't like this car anyways, there's actually incongruence. There's a lack of acknowledgement, and that's actually not what you're talking about.
Okay,
right?
so one's denial or avoidance. So basically, if I could say you're bullshitting yourself, right? You're pissed inside. You're just playing out or you're acting as if.
Yeah.
Well, I get that, and I think that might be a step in the right direction, but not to the expense of disassociating.
Yeah.
If you're disassociating and you're not acknowledging something that really is upsetting you, you're just creating more polarity in your body and more dis-ease.
Yeah, so someone who has naturally lower tension in the body, who's naturally just more conscious, will gravitate towards looking for they'll naturally see the positive.
Well, if they have that low of tension, then the only way they could be that way is if they tend to give things a positive meaning. Yeah. So it supports itself.
So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I
Cool.
would actually say through getting, because I've been getting work done for like 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years, I actually more naturally can see the gift in situations more easily, where before it was all like taking it like life is out to get me. Now I've shifted into it like in most situations I can see, like even if I can't see exactly what the gift is, I know there's a gift somewhere. And so yeah.
So that gets into play. Kwong and I just mentioned, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Was it you are peaceful because of your meaning, or was it that the other way around? And
the stress and tension was lower, so I was able to.
And I will say that more peace inside, more peace outside.
Yeah.
The more peaceful a person is within, the more they start giving things a more positive meaning spontaneously and effortlessly. But it can take a little bit to get to that point. You have to put some energy in. You have to open up as a person before that perception becomes more readily available. And then the awareness with it. Because the more you're connected, the more aware you are of your own game and how you're showing up and how you're playing the game of life.
Yeah.
So connection is amazing.
Even just the mental understanding of what each stage is about, like stages 1 through 12, kind of helps you understand that as well.
Okay, and then
Put everything together.
now that's the intro, right?
That's
Now,
the intro.
before we
I thought
started,
that was the whole thing.
yeah, well, we're
Where
about
you
to
go?
say it.
Oh, I'm excited now.
Ashley paused, and then we went into the analogy. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
now we'll start the intro again. That was a good intro. I mean,
Wait, no, it's at the body of the podcast.
was that the body, and then the intro is next? Okay.
Wait, didn't we already do the intro?
No.
That
So-
was an extended intro,
Oh.
I think.
The
It was
intro-
an intro. an
Okay, the
that
intro
overflowed.
was we were trying to figure out what to talk about before, right? And
Here's the intro.
Dominic brought up that right now what he notices is a lot of suffering, and how suffering can actually be a gift, and that's something that he would like to talk about. Ashley
It's gonna
didn't
go
contribute
with the
anything.
flow.
She just wanted to go with the flow. No, I'm just kidding. And I
Contribute
said
nothing.
something I had in mind was I was interested in talking about waking up from an energetic standpoint.
And then they tie in together.
And then we're just going to see how it tied in together as we discussed. And actually, right before we recorded, I gave some of my perspective. Dominic said he disagreed, and then we didn't actually he didn't tell me what his disagreement was.
Ashley said, wait,
We were just going to discuss on
time
camera.
out.
Yeah.
Go in your
Before-
corner, you go
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
corner,
yeah.
turn on the
We
camera.
were just going to
Record.
discuss on
and then they're
camera
going to let us loose.
and see what happens. All right, so I guess I'll start, and then you can start telling me about the part you disagree with, and then we'll discuss and see what happens.
You look so excited.
Okay.
Because I already have an idea of how this is going to turn out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now this term waking up, right? Waking up from the matrix is being thrown around a lot. And again, this is just my opinion. But I would like to talk about it from an energetic standpoint. Okay, so everything essentially is energy and information. You could categorize in that one way, right? There's bound energy, so like our body's bound energy, a battery's bound energy. There's unbound energy, like the sunlight, just the wind flowing through, like out there, right? There's bound and unbound energy, and they kind of bind and unbind. That's kind of how nature works, okay? For all of us, there's a baseline that we kind of default to, right? Our baseline energy level. It doesn't mean how excited you are, you're jumping up and down, all that stuff. It's just how coherent it is where it's actually usable, okay? So for example, when we're sick, the baseline amount of energy drops and it feels like everything is just a lot harder. Even like walking feels more painful. We have no tolerance for pain. We can't do anything, right? And there are other times where you're just inspired. You're not necessarily jumping up and down and all excited, but literally you could just do this and this, like, oh my God, I just accomplished all that stuff in one day, right? So that's just kind of like an intro to energy. And then there's our energy level in different parts of life. Okay, so for me, when it comes to physical fitness and then health, I'm doing it, my baseline's at a pretty good level, right? Whereas when it comes to, say, like finances, up until recently, I would say it fluctuated a lot, and my baseline was not as good of a level. Okay, so there's your baseline in general, and then even in different parts of your life, you have a baseline in that area of life. Okay, when it comes to waking up, my definition, or mostly what I'm talking about, is changing your baseline. Because as your baseline changes, it allows you to start seeing blind spots and accessing other specific areas of life and having more opportunities to start shifting that. Now, the old model, so anyone who studies self-development has come across this, right? Usually it's trauma or pain, okay? Usually trauma or pain actually creates an awareness that actually helps you unbind energy, and then you shift your baseline from trauma or pain. And Ideally, yeah, or some people just hold on to it and they never even get that opportunity, right? But when you actually grow, if you look back, you trace the origins that actually came from trauma or pain. And then with what I'm studying now with Donnie, right, the model, at least he's advocating that that we're working to shifting towards is that just shifting your attention and awareness is enough, and you don't have to actually have trauma or pain to actually bring your awareness to something to shift your baseline. Okay?
Nice.
Now, this is what we got into. So we were talking about masks. That's a big thing socially, right? Right now, you can see kind of, there's the people who think wearing masks, okay, whether it's from fear or whether it's because they're wearing it because that's what a lot of people in society are doing, you know, to fit in. Like there's like a baseline, right? I'm wearing a mask for this reason. Then there's the people that are like, my freedom, constitutional rights, I'm not gonna give in to this fear. And that's like a lot of the other people. And you can see it's kind of like butting heads with the first group. And there's a lot of like, well, I'm awake, you're not awake, you're just in fear. And it actually, the more someone actually pushes their constitutional rights, if anything, it almost seems to make the other side want to push back more, like where you're just being selfish, you're you know, like all the, I don't even know the specific names and like labels you're calling, but you kind of get the idea, right? And I said, so that's at a certain energy level, right? An energy level above that would be noticing, okay, maybe I don't necessarily feel fear or that it's actually doing anything, but I recognize that if I put on the mask, it lowers just the defensiveness or general tension of the other person, allows a more productive dialogue, and it actually will help create more effective conversation. That's one way to go about it, right? And that's, to me, is at a higher energy level. And then if you can actually get present to, okay, from that conversation, how do I impact this other person, where when that person goes around his or her life to do other things, maybe they'll actually make a butterfly effect where this creating more of an impact. That's an even higher energy level or more, or a bigger system that we become aware of. And then Dominick says he has a different take on it.
Look.
So I'm gonna let him jump in.
Has to say.
You
I'm
have
gonna let
no
him,
idea
I'm gonna
how
let him
hard
jump
it is
in.
for me to close my big mouth and wait and let him finish his
Now I'm
conversation.
gonna let him jump in now.
Chomping at the bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I totally see Kwong's perspective and why that would be allow the person who's communicating with to have ideally a lowered tension or a lowered resistance to the conversation and less of an emotional charge so that he can communicate with them. There's other ways to do it, and in my opinion, maybe even more effective. So what I've noticed is that what motivates behavior is emotion. That's the purpose of emotion. The more emotion, the more behavior, right? And the more the behavior is influenced. And the only way someone can make a huge shift, a significant shift in behavior, lose weight, stop smoking, start smoking, put on a mask, is if they give something an empowering meaning. There's a lot of emotion behind it. So right off the bat, that's a huge polarity. That's a stage 2, we call it, or a rhythm of polarity. I have to have the mask, you have to have the mask, it's me, it's the world, it's me against the corona, polarity galore. And if I have the mask, I could definitely see why what Kwong is saying is accurate. Hey, if I have a mask, I can talk to this person, there's less defense initially. So you're sort of, by default, in their story, or the other person is seeing you as buying into the same story that they're seeing in. Therefore, you're on the same team, you can have that conversation. That's great. That definitely works. But what I'm saying is, what if you come at it from a completely different energy state? And the energy that I'm talking about is rather than wearing a mask, because first of all, if you're not going to have a conversation with someone who's wearing a mask about why I'm not or am, unless I'm not wearing anything, so the conversation is never going to come up. So the opportunity for growth is completely thrown out the window. So to tie it in, if someone comes up to me, let's say at Whole Foods, and says, "Hey, you're not wearing a mask. You need to be wearing a mask." Well, the person is obviously emotionally charged. They have a lot of stage 1 suffering associated with it, a lot of emotion, a lot of polarity. If I am wearing the thing, they're never going to come up to me. So there's no situation for them that's going to give them an opportunity to move forward. So by not wearing one, I'm actually creating the space for someone who has an emotional charge to come talk to me, to have a conversation. So that's the first point. The other point is, rather than creating the environment where someone is more comfortable, I don't want to create an environment where the person's comfortable. I want to create an environment where they have the opportunity to approach me about something they're uncomfortable about, which not wearing the mask creates that environment. But also I need to be on my game, because if they come up to me, they're emotionally charged. So I got to make sure that I'm at a place where I can show up, because life fills voids. I just created a void. And if I go into Whole Foods, I need to know, hey, make sure you're connected, make sure you're open, make sure you're at a peaceful place. Because if there's 100 people in the store, chances are one of them is going to give you the stink eye and maybe even come over and say something. Cool. So what can I do to sponsor that person that's filling that void that I just created? Or let's say spiritually taking me up on that opportunity to move that energy, because that's really what's going on. If the person approached me, hey, why aren't you wearing a mask, and then put a 10-second spin on it, you're inconsiderate, you're an SOB, you don't give a shit about anybody else but yourself, you probably have a gun in your car too, like, let's just paint that picture, right? But then first thing I would do is I would just acknowledge the person. Say, you know what? You seem like you're a pretty sharp guy. You're wearing the mask, which means that you're thinking about everybody else other than yourself, right? Because you don't want to compose. So I would basically acknowledge the other person for what they are already doing and bring them energetically from a polarized place to a state where they have more fuel available, more energy available, like Kwong often talks about, I'm sure. So I'm bringing them up to a different energy state. And then once I bring them up to an energetic state, and in doing that, I would acknowledge their emotional charge. Because remember, when someone has an emotional charge, you're no longer dealing with a human being. You're dealing with the reptilian brain. They're on autopilot, they're just reacting. So what do you do to deal with this reptile? Acknowledge them. Create rapport. Connect with them. Do things that not only dissipate the energy, but actually add to them, and how what they're doing is a good thing. Almost as if they could see that you see, that I see from their perspective why they're doing what they're doing. And once I acknowledge the person and they know that I understand why they're doing what they're doing and all the great things about it, and I've acknowledged their perception and how important it is to them and what gifts they bring to the world by doing that, let me tell you what, not only is there not polarity, but that person now has been acknowledged, they're now open, and they now are at a place where they spontaneously, if I did a good enough job acknowledging them and bringing them up to a different energy state, they're going to say, you seem like they like me now because I just said how wonderful they are, right? And acknowledge them and their perception of what's important to them. But typically what happens at that point is they want to know, they're like, you seem like a really nice guy, Dominic. You seem to be aware of how wearing a mask is not only for you as an individual, but for the community's good. And you seem to understand that. Tell me why you're not wearing a mask. I want to understand it from your perception. Once the person feels they've been heard, they've been acknowledged, they feel appreciated, they're aware that their perception, I'm aware of their perception and their story and even appreciate it, at that point they're oftentimes open to my perception and where I'm coming from.
They can
so
hear
now
you.
They can hear me. And now we could actually have a conversation between two human beings who feel as though we're both intelligent, we both appreciate each other, and it's an opportunity for growth. So I say never meet people where they're at. Meet them at a higher consciousness or a higher energy place.
Can you do both?
You can definitely do both, but you're never going to have the conversation. I'm never going to have that conversation with someone if I'm wearing the mask. Is my only disagreement with Kwong.
Well, meeting them from it almost kind of sounds like you are actually saying or like meeting them from a higher energy state and meeting them where they are. So like Kwong says this all the time, you can stay at if you're at this higher energy level, you can stay there.
No, we're not laughing at you.
So the moment,
I'm laughing at the look on Dominick's face.
So I'm the worst poker player because I get a set of cards and I'm like, shit, I get so excited. So Kwong, he's smiling again. He's got something.
Yeah. Keep going. No,
keep going.
Yeah, I was laughing at Dominic. The look on Dominic.
Okay, so you can be at whatever energy state you are. But then you meet them where they are
Yes.
with that acknowledgement. You don't have to lower your energy state in order. And I don't think Kwong was even saying that. You don't have to lower your energy state. You don't have to meet them where they are. You can stay at a higher energy state and acknowledge them meeting them where they are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I totally get where you're at. So actually, what Kwong and I are saying are like 99% the same.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that by not wearing the mask,
It's
I
wearing the
created
sorry
a
mask.
larger void, a more obvious void, and I'm probably going to have
You're bringing the
more
emotion up.
opportunities for connection with other people and opportunities for growth than if I were wearing a mask. I just went in. Even though I don't necessarily play into the communal consciousness by wearing a mask, I'm pretending to be, and I no longer have that void. That void isn't there, and the opportunity for engagement with others isn't there. So what I'm saying is, don't do things to make people comfortable because there's no growth there. Or what I'm saying is, be where you're at, but be conscious and aware to know that you just created a void, and make sure that you're at a place where you could show up in a way that everybody has an opportunity for growth if you're going to do that. And if you're not at that place, put the friggin' mask on.
Okay, so a couple things, right? So Dominic talked about not making people comfortable, or not having your primary goal to make someone comfortable. So then, like, what does it mean to be comfortable?
Comfortable for a lot of people means you buy into their story, and that they see that you buy into their story, and that your values and perceptions are consistent with theirs. Then people typically feel comfortable. Smokers like being around other smokers. Drinkers like being around other drinkers. Fighters like being around other fighters. So they have the same value system, the same wants, the same needs, and you buy into the same story and perception and behavior that the other person does.
Right. So he's talking,
and they typically stay the same and don't grow very much from that.
And it comes down to essentially, like, one way to look at it is tension, right? So basically, if I agree with everything he says, there's no tension, right? If I start disagreeing with a little, or even just by the way I act, by the way I dress, there becomes a little bit more tension. Now, there's tension between individuals, tensions between groups, and there's tension within a cultural field, right? So we're talking about the Whole Foods in Winter Park, right? They have someone in the front handing out masks. And then when I walked in there, and I'm in the non-mask wearing group, I'm like the only one not wearing a mask. And I could
so you're in the store, you shop, you're not wearing a mask.
I'm not wearing a mask.
You say no thanks, and you proceed.
Yes, okay, and I feel the tension to say no to the mask, and I feel the tension walking around without a mask in Whole Foods. There's a Publix about half a mile down, probably about 30 to 40% of the people there versus 90% in Whole Foods. I feel very little of that tension. Now in the Publix, I feel tension walking down an aisle that's marked one way that I'm not supposed to go, right?
So
like,
that too.
Yeah,
it's by accident, but
yeah, and
I got the dirty looks. That
yeah, it's like, and it's not like malicious, but then I walk down and I'm like, oh wait, I'm like, it's like, so like, but when we're talking about comfort, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And so where did the energy of that uncomfort come from? Did it come from the collective consciousness, or did it come from you and your judgment and conflict within self?
Yeah, so there is and I actually wanted to talk about this. Thanks for bringing it up. So there's a cultural field, right? There's something that collectively we're part of, and really a lot of, when people talk about wanting to change the world, one of the main things they're talking about is how do we shift enough of the consciousness so the cultural field shifts, right? And then so there's essentially the baseline shifts, and there's, if you look into like spiral dynamics or whatever, like, estimates like, 10% of the people shift in consciousness, all of humanity shifts, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows, right? It's an estimate. So the cultural field is a very neutral field. It seems very strong until you could bring energy richness to it. So energy richness, again, isn't being all excited, jumping up and down. It's just a level of coherence where it could start impacting the people around you, okay? Once you could bring energy richness to the cultural field, then it becomes a very weak field. But if you're energy neutral, which is what by default the cultural field is, it feels like a very strong field, right? People use the word, the phrase, being on the, people want to be on the warm end of the pool, right? Because when you're not, everyone is saying or thinking one thing, and you truly believe this, but you're on the other side, that tension or that feeling of being alone it's very, very powerful unless you're actually able to bring an energy richness to your own field, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. So the example I gave actually wasn't even about the mask, right? It's that it's not the mask itself, it's the amount of energy you can bring to an action depending on where your attention and awareness is. Okay, now for me, the focus and intention is on something bigger, right? How do I show up in a way where I can remove stress for the other person? The conversation becomes a lot easier, yes. Right? And this comes down to meeting people where they're at, right? So I remember this was about 8 or 9 years ago. I was coaching for a company called Landmark, and I was going through the coaches training program, right? And obviously I was already into fitness then, and my coach at the time decided to have a conversation about me, how I think like my shirt was wrinkly or something. Her name's Michelle, sorry Michelle. But I got on my high horse and I said, you're having a conversation with me about my shirt being wrinkly. What about you having a conversation with the other coaches in training about them being fat and out of shape? We were talking about performance and coaching. They're eating like crap and not taking care of their body. Isn't that important, right? If it's all about like appearances, like why are we only talking about like how we're dressed? What about all this other stuff, right? And she was like, whoa, like Kwon, I've never seen this before. And that was just like one of the things. I'm like, I already have to like do all this stuff in the military to make sure my uniform or outfit is like what is it called?
So she brought up a wound by saying that.
Yeah.
She triggered something that you had.
Yeah, and it was very, very like I'm right, you're wrong, all of this stuff. That stuff's not that important, right? And honestly, to this, I mean, look at me. Like what I wear, it doesn't really matter to me that much. Okay, and then the guy running the program, his name was Wes. I don't know, who knows? Maybe he'll see this. He actually called me up. And he was a great listener. He's just a great coach, okay?
Is he a big guy?
Tiny guy.
Okay.
Tiny, not tiny guy. He's probably like 5'9", 5'10". Really good shape, works out. He's in Phoenix. And he's like this very like fun, gay guy. Like just a lot of personality, right? And so he calls me up, right? He goes, hey, Kwon, what's up? I heard something about the dress code with Michonne. Her name's Michonne, not Michelle. And I don't know what he did. That's all he said. And as he as he said that to me, right? And that's all he said. It literally like clicked in for me that I'm dressing a certain way, not for me. Because whenever I'm thinking about I'm doing something for me, my energy drops. It literally clicked in for me. When I'm dressing a certain way, it's actually for the people that go in front, right? What we're training at the time was to like lead introductions and everything. So there's people that, you're leading the introduction. If you dress a certain way, it just makes it easier and smoother. Can you do it without it? Yes, right? But you show up, you dress sharp, you're just probably a little bit more effective because you have to overcome less of a barrier, right? If you look like you take care of yourself, you look like you know what you're doing, there's less of a barrier. It doesn't mean you can't make that difference, but it actually just makes it easier to make a difference. And like that, when Wes asked me that question, all of that clicked in for me, and I literally just go, yeah, I actually get, I'll dress different from now on. He go, that was easy, and then like hung up. That was a conversation. So when Dominick is talking about not meeting someone to make them comfortable, I totally agree. Like that doesn't do anything. You're literally dropping your energy and no difference is gonna be made, okay? You have to actually, and this is what a huge focus of what we're learning now is you have to actually witness where the other person's at though, right? So that's their energy field, their emotional state, everything they're at, and you're fully AA or awareness, acknowledge and accepting what's going on in that moment. Because that's actually what's there, right? So if they're here, you actually fully meet them here and simultaneously you hold a bigger vision. So you're actually doing both. I think that's what Ashley was starting to get into, right? So you meet them where they're at, not to make them comfortable, you meet them where they're at so they actually are fully acknowledged, which is essentially what Wes did to me now looking back, right? And then just by him doing that, it literally opened up my thinking. So not, instead of being like, well, look at all these fat people, why do I have to dress up? It's like, it was just a
Which
different.
Which actually defend itself.
Yeah, it was just a different, it was just a different relationship to it. Okay, so, I don't know, do you have anything else?
No, I knew this is where the conversation was going to go. We were going to agree, but my angle was just, don't wear the mask. If you're at a place where you feel that you can hold the higher vision, and you feel that you can show up on your A game, and I don't mean my A game like you can manipulate someone. I mean your A game like you're coming from a place of compassion, and you know that you can control your energy state despite how the other person shows up. And if you have that, then you're literally sponsoring person that you interact with to have an awakening, to have a perception shift, to move the energy of the event. And if you don't wear the mask, you're definitely created the opportunity for more of that. That's the only disagreement I think that we had at any point of this is have a great experience, walk into Whole Foods, get your stuff and get out, or not wear the mask and know that someone might approach you. I'm saying, hey, if I'm feeling it that day and I'm on it and I'm connected, I'm not going to wear the mask. And if someone comes up to me, then I know spiritually their guides brought them to with mine, and I'm gonna have an empowering conversation with them. Yeah, and like
ultimately, I'm sure most people watching this have had this kind of experience at some point, right? Like you'll see on like Facebook, and someone posts something. You're like, oh my God, like literally your relationship to them is like, this person is, for lack of a better word, like just dumb, not smart, gross, and like just like, what the hell? And then you actually have a conversation with that person in real life, and it's like, as you're talking, it's like, this is just not how I related to that person on Facebook, right? Like just a real life conversation was very different from the feeling and impression I got on Facebook.
That's actually, there, like a few days ago, or a week ago, you were like going into polarizing me, and then I just like was like pushing you to like communicate with me, and you're like, if I have a conversation with you, I can't polarize you. So
I was aware.
You have to not talk.
I said, well, if you talk to me, I can't polarize you. And when we both started laughing, which actually dissipated the energy of it, because I was aware of it from doing all the SRI, and then just acknowledging it, and we both dissipated it for both of us. So it was
so like really, if I had to get down to the mask doesn't actually matter that much, right? Like with the example I was giving was just the energy level with your focus. Honestly, like once you connect to another human being, a lot of all this like very like lower vibration stuff just automatically shifts anyways. It's not even part of the conversation when you're really connecting with a human being. You guys could have different thoughts, right? And like different perspectives and viewpoints to get to things, but like the more you communicate with someone, you get, what we actually all want is for the world to be a better place, right? We want joy in the world. We want to feel better, not from like doing not from like buying expensive clothes or whatever. It's just like, but we want to feel better in a way where like our souls are just more lit up, And
if I could expand on that, what Kwong's saying is, we've all been in pain before, and I can share with you that as long as I know that I'm growing as a result of this uncomfort, I'm completely fine with the discomfort. So what I interpret Kwong saying is, as we all want to feel better, we all want to feel like we're growing. Because even if we're uncomfortable, but we know we're growing, we're comfortable and we feel encouraged and we feel expanded because we know that we're growing and we're becoming something more as a result of the experience. So that's why I always come back to never seek comfort, always seek the growth. And in that, we feel amazingly embraced and supported in life.
Yeah, when and I get, it's good that you clarify. So when I say I feel better, it's like there's joy, or actually feeling joy, and there's feeling less crappy, right? A lot of times when we say feel better, it's just like you don't feel as bad, or you numb yourself. That's not what I meant. It was more what Dominick meant.
Glad I could clarify.
Yeah, thanks.
And we also all just want that soul connection as well. And having a conversation with someone and actually listening to someone else, you actually will always see similarities between yourself and them, and then there's a connection and that oneness. And that's when joy within a relationship is happens, and it's a lot of fun. So,
And
Yeah.
to bring it back to the mask, the first probably 20 seconds of a conversation with someone confronting me for not wearing a mask in Whole Foods, I would say the first 15, 20, 30 seconds is about the mask. I would say way by that time, the energy exchange that's happening at that point has nothing to do with the mask. It's about the person's concerns in life. It's concerns about they're going to go home and see the grandmother, and the grandmother can't be exposed to the freaking corona right now, or the COVID-19. Like, literally within seconds, it has nothing to do with the mask, but it has to do with the person's concerns. It's just as if Kwong's wrinkly shirt or whatever's going on in life, those are just circumstances that life's creating an opportunity for you to bring your concerns to the forefront, which is really an opportunity for healing.
Yeah, and then you wanted to talk about suffering. Did you want to fully tie it in? Because you already kind of touched on it
Tying
in
it
a way.
in? Oh, yeah,
If
but
you
that's
want
a
to.
whole, that's
Okay,
a
okay,
whole,
okay.
depends on how long you want this to
Okay.
be.
Part 2.
Maybe
for
we'll do
that.
another part, yeah. Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
I see, where Talia gets her hand movements because the mic is right here. So I was like looking.
Have I
at
touched
you.
it? Have
I mean, you got really
We'll
close.
find out
I was
when she
like,
does the editing.
I think it was fine though. But
Yeah.
We'll find out. Yeah, I understand your concern though, because if I bumped into the mic,
It's not actually a big
the whole
deal.
we have to read.
But I was like,
might have to
don't
redo
touch
it.
it. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I see why you'd be concerned.
one take. We'll film all the way through.
Yeah.
So song. Actually, you want to have him pick?
Sure. Guest
Okay.
picker.
So you get to pick a song that's going to be at the end of this. So
Yes.
any song you want to pick.
Yeah.
Hey, I grew up. The '80s were a good time, man. Shaka Khan all the way.
What?
I don't
What?
know what that is.
Shaka Khan.
Shaka Khan.
Everybody Shaka Khan. That's all I want to do. Wanna
Go-
be,
go
wanna
look it
love
up.
you,
Okay,
wanna
okay.
do, wanna
She'll
bring
look it
you
up.
into my arms, the spiritual things.
We'll get
spiritual
get
things.
educated. I don't know that song.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
Yeah, I
80s
don't
were
know
great,
that one.
man. The 80s were great.
All right.
Is that what it's actually called?
Shaka Khan, check it out.
That's it. Shaka Khan.
Shaka Khan.
Bye, guys.
Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, that's all I wanna do, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, Chaka Khan, let me rock it, got a feel for you, Chaka Khan, what you tell me what you wanna do you feel for me the way I feel for you, Chaka Khan, let me tell you what I wanna do, I wanna love you, wanna hug you, wanna squeeze you too, and let me take it in my arms, let me feel you with my charm, Chaka, cause you know that I'm the one to keep you warm, Chaka, I make it more than just a physical dream, I wanna rock you, Chaka, baby, cause you make me wanna scream, let me rock it, rock it. Let me rock it, that's all I wanna do. Chaka Khan, let me rock it, Chaka Khan. Let me rock it, got the feel for you, feel for you.
I'm physically attracted to you.
let me rock it, that's all I wanna do. Shaka Khan, let me rock it, Shaka Khan. Let me rock it 'cause I feel for you. Shaka Khan, would you tell me what you wanna do? Do you feel for me the way I feel for you? Shaka Khan, let me tell you what I wanna do. I wanna love you, wanna hug you, wanna squeeze you too. So let me take you in my arm, let me feel you with my tongue, Shaka. 'Cause you know that I'm the one to keep you warm, Shaka. I make it more than just a physical dream. I wanna rock you, Shaka, 'cause you make me wanna scream. Feel for you. Chaka, 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 chaka.